I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I stood on the front steps of a building I paid for, in a tuxedo my wife picked out before she died, and my only daughter told me I could not come inside. It was the dedication night for the Marion Crane Pediatric Rehabilitation Wing at Cottonwood Regional Health in Wichita, Kansas. Marion was my wife of 46 years. I wrote the checks for that wing. I chose the color of the brick because it matched the trim on the house we bought in 1981. And at the glass doors, under her name carved 18 inches tall in Indiana limestone, my daughter Nadine put her hand flat on my chest and said, "Dad, your name isn't on the program tonight." The board thought it was cleaner. "Please go home before you embarrass yourself." 300 people were inside. Surgeons, city council, the men I'd built parts alongside for 40 years. I felt every one of them looking at me through that glass. I did not yell. I did not beg. I said, "All right, sweetheart." I turned around, walked back to my truck, and called my attorney from the parking garage. By Friday morning, my daughter had lost every single thing she had spent 2 years stealing. Before I take you through it, my friend, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I read every one of them. And if you've ever been treated like a burden by the very people you carried on your back, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is for you. My name is Ellis Crane. I'm 71 years old. I started a machine shop in a rented Quonset hut with one lathe, one Bridgeport mill, and a wife who did the books at the kitchen table with a baby on her hip. That shop became Crane Aerostructures. We make titanium fittings and structural brackets for commercial aircraft, the small, unglamorous pieces that hold a wing to a fuselage at 35,000 feet. If you flew anywhere in this country in the last 20 years, you sat above something my people made. Marion died 14 months ago, pancreatic. 11 weeks from the diagnosis to the funeral. I want you to understand that grief, because grief is the door they came in through. Let me take you back to that Wednesday night in October. The wind coming across the parking lot had that dry Kansas edge to it, the kind that finds the gap between your collar and your neck. I had on a black tuxedo. Marion bought it for me in 2019 for a supplier banquet in Fort Worth, and told me I looked like a man who'd finally learned to sit still. In my inside pocket, I carried a flat cardboard sleeve. Inside it was the original 1,979 pencil drawing of the first bracket I ever sold. A bad drawing, honestly, on graph paper, with a coffee ring on the corner. Along the bottom edge, in Marion's handwriting, it said, "Ellis, build it right. I'll handle the rest." I'd had it professionally matted. I was going to hang it in the lobby of her wing that night, and hand the frame to my grandson Theo in front of everybody. Her wedding band hung on a chain under my shirt. It still does. I parked, and I stood there a minute looking at the building. 4 stories of glass and that warm brick. Aquatic therapy pool on the ground floor. Gate lab on 2. 14 family suites so a mother from Liberal or Dodge City doesn't have to sleep in a chair while her kid learns to walk again. $6,400,000 of my money, plus a $2.8 million bridge for the construction overrun that my daughter told me the foundation desperately needed in March. I was proud. I want to be honest with you about that. I was proud the way an old man gets proud, which is quietly and with his hands in his pockets. Nadine was standing at the doors when I came up the walk. 44 years old, my daughter, in a green dress, holding a clipboard she didn't need. She's the chief development officer for the hospital foundation. Her husband, Desmond Pryor, was a step behind her in a dark suit, looking at his phone the way a man looks at a phone when he's decided not to look at you. For about 4 seconds my heart lifted, because I thought she'd come out to walk me in. Then I saw her jaw, and I saw her plant her feet. "Dad." Her voice was low and fast. "What are you doing here?" I actually laughed. "What do you mean, what am I doing here?" "It's your mother's wing. I'm giving the drawing to Theo." "Theo isn't here." She glanced over her shoulder at the light and the noise inside. "And you're not on the program. Development handled the seating. There was an error in the invitation list, and there isn't a place set for you." I stood there in the cold, trying to make the sentence mean something ordinary. "Nadine, I paid for the building. The foundation paid for the building." She said that very quickly, and I filed it away, though I didn't understand yet what I was filing. "Dad, please. There are donors in there. There's press. You've been having a hard year and everybody knows it. And I am not going to let you stand up in front of 300 people and get confused about what year it is." Confused. That word went into me like a splinter goes into a palm. You barely feel it going in. Desmond finally looked up. My son-in-law has one of those faces that's been professionally smoothed. He said, Ellis, this isn't the night. Security's right inside the vestibule. Don't make anyone do something unpleasant. Now, I want you to hear me, friend. I have negotiated with airline procurement officers who would sell their own mother for a 4-cent unit price reduction. I have sat across a table from union representatives at 2 in the morning during a strike vote. I did not build that company by throwing fits. A man who screams in a doorway is a man who has already handed the other side the story they want to tell about him. So I looked past her, through the glass, into the lobby of my wife's building, and I saw who was really in there. It wasn't donors. Not most of them. I recognized 3 men from an aerospace roll-up firm out of Chicago called Anvil Point Industrial. I recognized a fund manager I'd turned down twice in 2021. These were not people who cared about a therapy pool for kids in western Kansas. These were buyers. I looked back at my daughter. She had on diamond studs I did not recognize. All right, sweetheart, I said. My voice came out flat and even, and I could see that scared her more than shouting would have. You go on in. It's a beautiful building. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the cab with the engine off and the cold coming through the window glass, and I took the cardboard sleeve out of my jacket and set it on the passenger seat where Marion used to sit. Then I called Ruthann Selby. Ruthann has been my lead counsel for 31 years. She is 68. She wears reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she has ended more careers than a bad economy. She picked up on the second ring. Ellis, shouldn't you be at a podium right now? Nadine just turned me away at the door, I said. In front of Anvil Point. There was a pause on that line I'll remember until I die. Ruthann didn't ask if I was okay. She asked the right question. What do you want done? Everything freezes tonight, I said. The Crane Family Trust, the Foundation pledge accounts, every distribution authority Desmond touches. And Ruthann, I want the last 24 months of the Wing's construction disbursements on my kitchen table by 7 tomorrow morning. It's done, she said. Ellis, listen to me. Don't take anything out of your medicine cabinet tonight until we talk in the morning. I thought that was a strange thing for a lawyer to say. I thought she meant don't take a whiskey on top of a pill and get sloppy. I told her good night. I want to stop here and say something, because I know some of you are already thinking it, and you're not wrong to think it. Why didn't you just call your grandson? Why didn't you call the hospital CEO? Why didn't you pick up the phone like a normal person? I did, friend. For 5 months I did. Theo Pryor is my grandson, 26 years old, a metallurgist, my daughter's son. He came to work in my metrology lab out of Kansas State, and he is the only person alive besides Marion who ever understood why I care so much about a bracket. In May, Nadine told me Theo had taken a 6-month contract with a supplier in Toulouse, France. A real opportunity, a big deal, and I should be proud. I was proud. I sent him a congratulations text and got back a thumbs up. That was the last real thing I got from him. After that, time zone excuses. He's on a plant floor, Dad. He can't have his phone. He's in a compressed schedule, Dad. He asked us to funnel things through me for a while. He's overwhelmed. In August, I texted him a picture of the Wing's steel going up, and it never delivered. I called, and it went to a recording that said the number was not in service. I asked Nadine, and she sighed and said he'd changed carriers for the international plan. She'd get me the new number. She kept forgetting. Sorry, Dad. Life's crazy. I believed her. That's the part I'd take back if I could take back one thing. I believed her because I was 71 and grieving, and I have learned that when you are grieving, people hand you a version of the world, and you take it, because holding your own version up takes strength you don't have that month. But I want to be fair to myself too, because a lot of folks watching are going to say an old fool got what he deserved for handing over money. Hear me. I never wired a dime blind in my life. Every dollar I gave that foundation, I asked for paper. I asked for AIA payment applications. I asked for lien waivers from the general contractor. In March, when Nadine came for the $2.8 million bridge, I made her bring me a signed request on Hospital Foundation letterhead with the CFO's signature on it, and I read it twice at my kitchen table before I signed anything. Remember that letterhead. It matters. The papers hit my table at 6:40 the next morning, and Ruthann came with them, and she didn't take her coat off. Here's the first thing that was wrong. My $6.4 million went to an account titled Cottonwood Regional Health Foundation Crane Wing Capital. Correct name, correct looking. But the routing didn't belong to the hospital's bank. It belonged to a business account at a small institution in Overland Park, opened 22 months ago, in the name of an entity called Larkspur Civic Partners, LLC. I said, "Who in the world is Larkspur?" Ruthann turned a page. Larkspur Civic Partners was organized in Delaware. Its registered agent was a mail drop. Its sole managing member was listed as N. Ardell. Ardell is my daughter's middle name. It was Marion's mother's name. I sat back in my chair and looked out the kitchen window at the bird feeder Marion hung in 2004, and the room went very quiet and very cold. Then Ruthann showed me the letterhead. The March letter, the one I read twice, the one with the CFO's signature, was fabricated. Good work, too. The seal was right. But the CFO, whose name was signed at the bottom, retired in January and moved to Arizona. He never signed anything. My daughter had forged a hospital officer's signature to get my money, which meant this wasn't a family disagreement about spending. It was a federal crime, and it had been a federal crime for 2 years. So where did the money go? Not to the wing. The wing was real, I want to be clear. The building went up, but it went up on hospital bond financing at a cost of just under $4 million. Everything above that had been walking out the back door. Larkspur wired in slices to a Nevada holding company, then out to an account in the Caribbean, and along the way it bought a lake house in Missouri, a boat, and a $2 million capital commitment in Desmond's private equity fund, Holloway Ridge, which, and this is the part that made me stand up out of my chair, was the co-investor alongside Anvil Point Industrial on a pending acquisition. The target of the acquisition was Crane Aerostructures. My company, $92 million. Signing scheduled for Friday at 9 in the morning. I sat back down. Ruthann let me have a minute. And in that minute, my friend, everything from the last 2 years turned over in my head like a hand of cards being flipped one at a time, and every card was a knife. Because now I understood the visit. It was 13 months ago, 6 weeks after Marion's funeral. Nadine came over on a Sunday with a coffee cake. She sat on the arm of my chair, which she hadn't done since she was a girl, and she took my hand, and she cried one perfect tear down one cheek, and I remember thinking what a strange thing to notice. She said, "Dad, we're worried about you." She said I'd repeated a story twice at Thanksgiving. She said I'd left the garage door up overnight. She said Mom's death had taken something out of me and everybody could see it but me. And then she said the thing that got in under my ribs and stayed there. "You don't have to keep carrying all of it. Let us carry some of it for you. That's what a family is for." Do you understand what she did there? She didn't attack me. She comforted me. She took the loneliest fact of my life, that the woman I built everything with was gone, and the house was too quiet, and she used it as a crowbar. She told me I was tired, and I was tired. She told me I was slipping, and every man past 70 who forgets where he set his glasses wonders in the dark if he's slipping. She was not lying to me about the world. She was lying to me about myself, which is the only lie that really works. 2 weeks later, she and Desmond brought me a durable power of attorney and a set of trust amendments, so nothing gets stuck if you ever have a bad stretch. I signed. Not blind, Ruthann reviewed them, and Ruthann put a provision in that I will tell you about later, because it's the reason I'm not in a locked ward tonight. And 4 months ago, they scheduled me a full cognitive evaluation at a neurology clinic in Kansas City. Framed it as routine, peace of mind before the gala. They would not take no. They sat in the waiting room wringing their hands where the receptionist could see them. I did 3 hours of testing, memory recall, sequencing, spatial reasoning, executive function, the whole battery. And at the end, the neurologist, a young woman with an unbelievably kind way about her, put my results in front of me and said my scores were in the top percentile for my age group, that there was no evidence of any degenerative process, and that if she were being honest, my working memory was better than most of her 40-year-old patients. I walked out of there so relieved I bought myself a chicken fried steak. Sitting at my kitchen table with Ruthann, I finally asked the question I should have asked that day. Why did they never once ask me what the results were? They didn't ask, friend, because the report was never the point. The appointment was the point. What they needed was a paper trail, a documented cognitive evaluation requested by concerned family, 4 months before a shareholder vote. They needed a file. Ruthann slid one more document across my table. It was a filing stamped by the district court 2 days before the gala, an emergency petition for temporary conservatorship over the person and estate of LSW, Crane, alleging progressive cognitive decline, financial impulsivity, and inability to manage his affairs. Petitioners, Nadine Crane Pryor and Desmond Pryor. Supporting declaration from a geriatric physician in Topeka I have never met in my life, who had reviewed collateral reports from family. Hearing date, Tuesday. 3 days after the Anvil Point signing. That's why I couldn't be in that lobby. Not vanity, not seating. If I had walked into that room in a tuxedo, upright, sharp, shaking hands and calling 40 people by name in front of the men buying my company, their entire story about a declining old man would have died on the marble floor. They didn't bar me from a party. They barred me from being witnessed. I got 2 hours of sleep that night, and at 3:40 in the morning, my phone lit up on the nightstand with a number I didn't recognize. Area code 316. Grandpa. Theo's voice cracking. Grandpa, please tell me it's you. I sat up so fast I saw stars. He wasn't in France, friend. He had never been in France. He was in Wichita, 40 minutes from my house, and he had been for 5 months. He'd been told I had suffered a series of small strokes. He'd been told I was in a supervised memory care evaluation program and that overstimulation from visitors would set me back. He'd been told I didn't want him to see me like this, that I'd said, "Don't let the boy remember me this way." He believed it because his mother told him, and he cried on the phone in a way that made me want to burn the world down. His number had been changed when Nadine consolidated the family plan. My texts weren't delivering because my number was blocked on his line, and he never knew, because who checks? And here is where I have to tell you about the worst 10 seconds of my life, and I'm going to tell you straight so nobody gets confused. Theo said, Grandpa, I was at the gala. I was in the donor lounge on the second floor. I recorded them. For about 10 seconds, and I am ashamed of every one of them, I thought. He was there. He was inside. He was in the room where they sold me. 10 seconds where I wondered whether the boy was in on it too, whether there was anybody left. Then he said, I've been recording them since August. I didn't know who to call. They told me you couldn't understand a phone conversation. He'd been building a case alone, at 26, against his own parents, on a phone in his jacket pocket. He wasn't in the room to celebrate. He was in the room because he was the only one of us who could get through the door. He sent me the file at 4:15 in the morning. I made coffee. I sat down at the desk in my office where I have made every hard decision of my adult life, and I put on headphones, and I pressed play, because there was no version of the rest of my life where I didn't press play. For a while it's just noise, glasses, a string quartet somewhere below, then a door shuts, and the sound goes tight and close, and there are 5 or 6 men in that room, and they're laughing. Anvil Point's people were talking about my shop like a carcass. Consolidate the Wichita floor into their Tulsa facility. Retire the Crane name inside 18 months. Cut 140 jobs. I know those 140 people, friend. I know which ones have kids in braces. Then Desmond. Smooth as glass. The legal path is clean. The conservatorship hearing is Tuesday. The shares get voted by the fiduciary. No minority holdout risk. And one of the Anvil Point men, a little drunk, a little too honest, asked the question straight out. He said, Your father-in-law's what? 71? What if he shows up Tuesday looking fine? Judges don't love taking a man's life away from him when he's standing there in a suit answering questions. And my daughter answered, Not Desmond, Nadine. In the voice she used to use to tell me she'd already done her homework, she said, He won't be sharp Tuesday. He hasn't been sharp on a Tuesday in 4 months. She said she'd been managing his prescriptions since Mom died. She said she picks them up, she fills the weekly organizer, she sets it on his counter every other Sunday. She said what's in that organizer hasn't been what the pharmacy put in the bottle since June. She said, By Tuesday afternoon he'll have trouble following the judge's questions. That's all we need. It's not permanent. It's not Desmond. Don't look at me like that. He's comfortable. He's just slow. Somebody laughed. Somebody said to family, Glasses touched. I took the headphones off and set them on the desk very carefully, the way you set down something that might go off. I want to describe to you what happened inside me, because it wasn't rage, not the hot kind. 14 months of grief, the sitting up at 2 in the morning, the talking to a woman who isn't in the room, the standing in the kitchen holding a coffee cup with nowhere to be, all of it drained out of me in about 30 seconds, and something clean and cold came in to fill the space. My own child had been putting something in my mouth to make me stupid, so that a court would believe she needed to take my life away from me. And the fatigue I had been apologizing to everyone for, the fog I had privately decided was the beginning of the end, the mornings I sat on the edge of the bed and thought, this is what it looks like when you start to go. That wasn't age. That was my daughter's hand. Do you know what she stole that's worse than the money, friend? She stole a year of me believing I was finished. Ruth Ann was at my house by 6. I told her what was on the recording. She listened without a single interruption, and then she did something I'd never seen her do in 31 years. She took her glasses off and pressed her fingers into her eyes. Then she said, "Ellis, we have 3 days. Here's what we do." The first thing was the medication, and I'm not going to walk you through details, because that's not what this is for. I went to my own physician that morning, a man who has known me since Reagan. I brought the organizer and the bottles. He documented everything, took blood, and made a report that went to the right people that same day. That's all I'll say about that part except this. Within about 10 days of eating properly and taking what my doctor actually handed me, the fog lifted like weather moving off a field. I could hold a column of numbers in my head again. I hadn't known how much I missed my own mind until it came back. The second thing was the provision. 31 years ago, when we set up the Crane Family Trust, Ruth Ann wrote in a clause that Marion thought was excessive and I thought was cheap insurance. It said that any single distribution or transfer above $250,000 initiated by an agent under power of attorney, without dual signature and 48 hours written notice to the trustee, automatically and permanently voided that agent's authority retroactively from the date of the first breach. Desmond had moved money on that authority 19 times. The first breach was in March of last year. So on the night my daughter blocked me at those glass doors, the power of attorney she was building her entire case on had not legally existed for 19 months. Every document Desmond signed under it was smoke. They had been standing on a floor that fell out from under them a year and a half ago, and neither of them ever looked down. The third thing was the part they never understood about what I built, and it's why I'm sitting here today instead of in a facility in Topeka. Desmond is a finance man. He looked at Crane Aerostructures, and he saw a building, 91 machines, a customer list, and a workforce. $92 million of tangible assets. But an aerospace parts company is not its machines, friend. Anybody can buy a 5-axis mill. What you cannot buy is the right to make a certified flight part. That comes from FAA parts manufacturer approvals, from qualified process specifications, from non-destructive testing certifications, from decades of documented conformity. That's the thing. That is the whole thing. And in 1994, because a banker in Denver got greedy and I got nervous, I moved every approval, specification, and process qualification out of the operating company and into a separate holding entity called Meridian Crane Holdings. Sole member, me. The operating company licensed them back for $1 a year. It was in the diligence data room. It was in a footnote on page 300 of an exhibit list. Nobody read it, because nobody reads footnotes when they're already spending the money. I told Ruth Ann to terminate the license effective immediately. She looked up at me over those glasses. "Ellis, that makes the company worth scrap metal and a parking lot," I said. "Do it," she filed Thursday evening. Now, they still needed me quiet for 2 more days, so I gave them quiet. Thursday morning I called Nadine. I let the phone ring, and when she picked up I made my voice small and slow and a half-second behind. "Sweetheart," I said, "did I miss something Wednesday?" I laid the tuxedo out. I think I fell asleep in the chair. Did the dedication already happen? The silence on her end was the sound of a woman who had braced for a fight and been handed a gift. Then her voice came back soft and warm as a heating pad. "Oh, Daddy. Oh, honey. It's okay. It was Wednesday. You were tired." And then, gently, patiently, like a nurse, "This is what we've been trying to tell you about." I closed my eyes and gripped the edge of my desk until my hand went numb, and I said, "Was it a nice night?" "It was beautiful," she said. "Mom would have loved it." I said, "Well, that's what matters." And I hung up and sat there for a long while. She'd have driven me to a locked door on Tuesday, holding my arm the whole way, telling me it was for my own good. Friday morning, 8:50. I put on a charcoal suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. I shaved twice. Theo picked me up in his truck, and he wore a jacket, and neither of us said much on the drive because there wasn't anything left to say that we hadn't said at 4 in the morning on the phone. The signing was on the 14th floor of a bank tower downtown. Ruth Ann was waiting in the elevator lobby with a leather folio under her arm and 2 men beside her in dark suits. Agents from the FBI's white-collar squad out of the Kansas City field office, who had spent Thursday with the forged letterhead, the offshore routing, the physician's declaration, and about 9 minutes of a recording made by a 26-year-old kid with a phone in his pocket. Through the frosted glass of the conference room, I could see the shapes. Desmond at the head of the table where he had absolutely no right to sit. Nadine beside him in a cream blazer. 4 men from Anvil Point. 2 stacks of signature pages squared up on the wood, pens already out. The clock over the reception desk clicked to 9. I opened the door myself. I want to tell you honestly that I didn't feel triumphant walking in. I felt tired and old and very clear. Every head came up. The color went out of my daughter's face in stages, like a bulb dimming. Dad. She half rose. Dad, what you're supposed to be at home. I was on the list, I said. There was a mistake. Ruth Ann stepped past me and set 3 things on that table. The first was a termination notice for the license of every FAA approval, process specification, and qualification held by Meridian Crane Holdings. She explained it in about 40 seconds, in plain English, to a room full of men who understood aviation. The company they were 40 seconds from buying could still cut metal. It could not legally sell a single flight-critical part to a single customer as of Thursday at 6:14 p.m., and it never would again without my signature. The lead man from Anvil Point read the first page. Then he read it again. Then he turned to Desmond and asked, in a voice I'd describe as murderous, whether he had known. The second thing Ruth Ann put down was the retroactive voiding of the power of attorney, which meant every instrument Desmond had signed for 2 years was void, including the ones the buyers had relied on. The Anvil Point men were already standing up. The lead one picked up the signature stack, folded it in half with both hands like a man tearing a phone book, and dropped it in front of my son-in-law. He said, "You've cost us 7 figures in diligence, and you've cost yourself considerably more than that." And they walked out, all 4, without looking back. The third thing Ruth Ann set on the table was a small black flash drive. She slid it down the wood until it stopped in front of my daughter. "That's the donor lounge," I said. "Wednesday night, 2nd floor. I've heard all of it, Nadine." She started to say the recording wasn't admissible, and stopped, because she heard what she'd just admitted. The agents came forward then. I'd asked them to wait until the buyers were gone. Not out of mercy, I wanted her arrested in an empty room, the way she wanted me humiliated in a full one, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend that isn't what I wanted. They read the charges: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft for the forged officer's signature, conspiracy, and financial exploitation of an elder. Desmond didn't say a word. He put his hands out like a man who'd been rehearsing. Nadine looked at me across that table and she said, "Daddy." And for 1 second she was 9 years old with a scraped knee on the driveway on Pershing Street. Then she said, "You would do this to your own daughter?" And Theo, who had been standing behind me the whole time, stepped up beside me and said the only thing he said in that room. He said, "You told me he was dying. You let me think he was dying, and you let me stay away." She had no answer for her son. That was the moment I watched something end in her face. They walked her out past me. She stopped, because the agent had to shift around the chair, and she was close enough that I could smell her perfume, and she looked up at me one more time. "Your name isn't on the program, sweetheart," I said. The lawyers thought it was cleaner. I buttoned my jacket and I turned my back on her, and I did not watch her go down the hall. "Here's where things stand, friend, since I know you'll want to know. Desmond took a plea in the spring. 51 months, plus restitution he'll be paying until he's my age. Nadine's trial is set for the fall. Her attorney is arguing that she was under her husband's influence, and I have been told I will likely be asked to testify. I have already decided that I will, and that I will tell the truth, and that the truth will not help her. 4,600,000 of my money came home from the Caribbean. About 2 million is gone for good. I've made my peace with that. The Marion Crane wing opened anyway. It opened in January, and it is full of kids, and there is a therapy pool. And last month a mother from Great Bend hugged me in the lobby and told me her son took 11 steps that morning. The framed drawing hangs by the elevators, the bad pencil sketch on graph paper with the coffee ring, and Marion's handwriting along the bottom. People stop and read it. That's all I ever wanted out of that building. Theo is running the metrology lab now. He'll have the company when I'm done with it, and he'll earn it, because I've decided the worst thing I ever did as a father was make my daughter's life so smooth she never once had to be strong. That's on me. I built a windbreak around that girl so tall she never learned there was weather. I won't do it twice. And I have 3 things I want to hand you before I go, because a story's only worth the time you gave it if you can use it. 1. Never sign a power of attorney without a clause that kills it automatically if it's abused. Dual signatures over a set amount. Written notice. Real teeth. Mine cost me nothing in 1994, and it saved my freedom in October. Ask your attorney for it by name. 2. Whoever fills your pill organizer should not be the same person who benefits when you're confused. If someone else picks up your prescriptions, keep the pharmacy's printout and check it yourself. That's not paranoia. That is the same thing as counting your change. 3. Pick your own doctor. If a family member schedules the evaluation, chooses the physician, and drives you to the appointment, you are not the patient in that room. You're the evidence. And one last thing, the one I actually came here to say. The money was never the wound. I want you to understand that. I could have lost the whole $92 million and slept fine. What kept me up was standing in a parking lot at 63 degrees in a tuxedo my wife bought me, holding a drawing nobody wanted, realizing that I had spent 46 years loving people who thought about me roughly, as often as you think about a light switch. That's the quiet ache of getting old, isn't it? Not being hated, being filed, being handled, being the thing on the list that somebody has to manage this weekend. So if you're out there tonight in a house that's too quiet, waiting on a phone call that keeps not coming, you're not soft, and you're not finished. And being loved less than you love does not mean you loved wrong. It means you did the whole job, and they only did part of it. Don't you dare let anybody use your grief as a handle to pick you up by. Blood makes somebody your relative. Only loyalty makes them your family. And sometimes the last, hardest act of love a father can perform is to stop paying for the person his child decided to become. If any of that landed, do me a kindness, hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't. And tell me down in the comments, have you ever been made to feel like a burden by somebody you carried? I'll be reading. We're all sitting at the same table here. Take care of yourself, my friend. I'll see you in the next one.